All right, so do a quick roll call. Tim Sprecher, Chair.
Mike Niesman, Secretary.
Catherine Bishop, President.
McCray Baker, Board Member.
Bernie Williams, Board Member.
All right. And then we have, in the agenda, we have, I think I'll speak this out loud so people have an awareness, and then we'll go forward. But so the call to order, the roll call, we'll be doing Parks Board minutes, review and approval of the October 18th ones drafts. Then we'll do our guests and presenters with Eric leading it off, and with the Parks and Forestry Director's report for today's date. Next on the agenda is the public comments, and that will include emails, and then new business, which is a discussion recommendation on the Parks Department fee schedule, discussion upon the Strand Associates channel and dredging feasibility study, which I will take quite a bit of time. I'm going to project. And then a discussion on the creation of a mill pond presentation, present state costs and feasibility to be presented to the City Council sometime in December, either the 5th or the 19th. And then we will determine a recommendation on a date and time for public comment on the mill pond proposals and feasibility studies. And then we'll do announcements, recommendations for things to be put into the future agendas. And then our next meeting is December 20th. So that's where we are with the agenda. So going forward, the Parks Board review and approval of October 18th. Any comments on the meeting minutes? That everyone have a copy of the in front of them? Bernie?
Yep.
Okay. The only thing I had that was Lisa Curler's name is actually spelled with is the E-I, Eric?
L-I-E-S-A.
Yeah, L-I-E-S-A.
Okay.
For Lisa.
Okay, then I can just ask Madison to change that.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on the minutes? Hearing no comments, do we have a motion to accept the minutes as amended as to Lisa's spelling?
So moved.
Seconded by?
I'll second.
Okay. Vote. Approve. Aye. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Oh, and Mike?
Yep.
They will take the draft off.
Or I can do it and send it with Saturday.
I think that she does it.
Okay, I'll ask her.
Yeah. Madison does it, I think, automatic.
Okay.
So it's going to get posted. All right. So thank you. Eric, would you please present your director's report?
Yep, so you guys have been provided a copy of my director's report. There are a couple things that I do want to highlight, but before I do that, is there any questions currently on the report that I have?
I can wait to go through, but just when you say anticipated return to automatic operation mode on October 31st of the dam, so it wasn't on automatic before, or what does that mean?
Correct. So we have kept it manual, and we've decided that we are going to keep the dam in manual operation until the acceptance of the new dam management policy. So we are hoping that that will be sometime in February of 2024. So we are leaving it as manual mode currently. It was operating in manual mode for the majority of summer due to some further evaluation of the dam and actual waterways.
I'm sorry, which policy? I didn't bring my hearing aid, sorry.
Dam management policy.
Dam, and that would be approved by whom? The
City Council
okay.
in February of 2024.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no other questions, some of the things that I would like to highlight is we are in our tree removal season for the time being. So we have really good weather, gives favorable conditions for my staff to complete their tree removals. The nice thing right now is it is fairly warm, allows us to actually get out there more than regular before it gets too cold. There is actually some potential employee absences planned, whether it be it's actually medical related for the time being. So we are trying to get as many of these removals done as soon as possible. Some of these larger ones, one of which did include the tree or silver maple in Commons Park today. I have submitted the Tree City USA application. This will be 32 continuous years. Hopefully, if we are actually recognized as Tree City USA, we do meet the minimum qualifications and in fact exceed the minimum qualifications for Tree City USA. And this will be the first year that I'm applying for a growth award. This is the first year we also do apply for a growth award for the minimum qualifications. There are all sorts of things that actually would qualify you for a growth award, but it still has to be applied for.
Growth award?
Growth award. Yep.
Can you tell us, sorry,
No, you're fine.
can you tell us what that means or what some
So
of the
growth
criteria are?
award means substantial improvements, changes, or basically advancements to an urban forestry program within a city. You're eligible, or each municipality is eligible for a growth award from Tree City USA. You have to be a prior annually recurring member of Tree City USA for 5 years to apply for it, and you're only eligible every 5 years since getting one. So there's not annual recipients of growth awards. If you apply for one, you have 5 years to again work on different qualifications to again apply for a growth award.
Okay, thank
So
you.
this will be the first time that we are applying for that, and keeping my fingers crossed that we do actually get that award. I don't know if this was spoken at the last meeting, but the ad hoc committee for tree urban management within the city has been approved, and 5 members have been appointed by city council. We're yet determining when it is that we're going to meet. We're looking at potentially a meeting in early December of this year, so we can get one meeting in before the first of the year. Specifically with Commons Park, like I said, one of the large silver maples near the actual ice skating rink was removed today due to substantial internal rot on the tree. But with Commons Park, the lights are decorated on the structures this year from a donation recurring in 2021 from the actual Christmas decoration donations from the Lake Mills Community Foundation. And we are going to be installing an electrical pedestal from a donation from both Mr. Electric and Schweiger Concrete to bring that within compliance to have the annually recurring lighting of the holiday tree down to the park near the Lions Shelter. So that pedestal installation will be occurring either late this week or early next week. It is anticipated that all of the lights will be in operation prior to Thanksgiving. They will be installed on Monday and Tuesday, and that's all of the actual light poles around downtown like we normally do, as well as any additional wreaths that go on them. We are anticipating on actually turning on those lights on Friday after Thanksgiving. For the Sandy Beach restaurants, the RFP, I know I said at last meeting, the RFP was awarded to Garver Events LLC under the name Zozo's Beach Club. At the next city council meeting, it's going to be proposed that the architectural RFP, basically requesting architectural firms to submit their applications or proposals to the city for design on a structure. So that will be at the next city council meeting. Rotary Club has begun fundraising efforts for the continuing expansion, or not expansion, but I suppose advancement of the pickleball courts down at Rotary Park. We have received those permanent nets that were approved, I believe, last year, but they are moving forward with the fundraising efforts for the different type of surfacing that's going to be on the pickleball courts themselves. So they are underway. They have some dollars under their name, and they're going to try different various efforts to secure some funding. Yes, sir.
Just, I heard today from a member that they're $500 short of their $18,000 goal already. So they're
Really?
They are zooming.
Well, congratulations to Rotary Club. I know they were a little nervous that they wouldn't secure all of those funds, but I'm very glad to hear that they actually are very close to being there. So other than that, are there any questions on anything else from my report? Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering, for you and our tree experts, you know, you were talking about the danger of oak wilt when you cut during a certain time. Does that time period need to be considered to be adjusted to make it later, given how warm weather seems to be occurring later?
Maybe someone can provide a little bit more feedback too, Bernie, but it's normally, at least per ordinance, it's October 15th to April 15th. We normally wait for basically as much of a dormant season as possible. So we won't do any trimming, pruning, unless it's been substantially cold.
Okay.
So it's been long-term sections of cold weather.
Okay.
Now that's just as per ordinance at October 15th to April 15th. But with it being warm, it's kind of up to our discretion how we interpret those. So we have been holding off on any oak trimming, pruning until it gets more sustained cold temperatures.
And the main reason is you're holding off the Metatula beetle, the picnic beetles
Right.
that fly. You're waiting for them to just sort of die out, and they stop flying around mid-August. So you're
Okay.
pretty safe after that. So
But at the same time, I know you made the comment today, we actually had some bees flying around.
yeah,
So it is within
Yes.
our discretion. We don't wait specifically for October 15th to start cutting oaks. We wait until we have sustained cold temperatures to begin trimming and pruning.
For
Yes, sir.
the pickleball courts, did we hear from the school district about frequency and cost of maintaining that surface?
Yep, so they were installed 2 years ago. They have yet to have any maintenance or repair done to them.
At the high school?
Yep. So over 2 years of heavy sustained use, they haven't seen any substantial degradation to them. 2 years is a little bit of a short time span to really determine what needs to be done as far as them. But it's not, as far as I know, an annual recurring maintenance need. Of course, the older they get, the more they will have to be maintained.
Mm-hmm.
But they haven't done any restoration efforts on the courts that they had done 2 years ago.
Okay.
For my own research, it seems it's all dependent on use. Obviously, areas that do have snow and everything else, there's going to be more maintenance to it. The more heavy sustained use you have with people actually scraping and running on the surfaces themselves, have more maintenance to them. But Cottage Grove has not yet done any maintenance on their courts, and they seem to be in good condition. I've seen them personally, but then again, they're fairly new, so I haven't seen any recurring or normal maintenance needs that need to be done to them.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Eric. Moving in the agenda item, it's number 6 is public comments, including emails, and then new business. So I'm going to put it out to the Parks Board and to the people present in that maybe public comments might want to wait until after discussion on the Parks Department fee schedule, or I don't know if we want to wait till after the feasibility study, because that might be a little more involved.
I do believe if you were to adjust where they're going to line up in the agenda items, I think you would have to make a motion to approve that. Is that right, Catherine?
I think seeing as if there's an objection, somebody can pipe up and object, but it may be in the chair's discretion. I'm a little wishy-washy on that one. Yeah, I don't know.
So are we just confirming what we discussed last meeting? For the,
I believe the public comments, including emails, would be whatever is going to come up
for
now.
the parks fees.
I thought Eric also wanted, we had some, to your question, are we approving the ones from last week? And the answer is yes.
Okay,
That's what
but
we'll
there's
do.
more?
But there are
Okay.
more to be discussed. So given that, so if we're going to go on the public comments and including emails, I'm putting it out there to say, do we want to, or are we just going to approve what we did last meeting, which would be, I don't know if you have the copy right there, Mike, of what we had determined.
Did not.
Well, now I'm confused. I'm sorry. Are you moving on then to 7A as an agenda item? You're skipping the public comments for later? Is that?
That's just a discussion I'm saying now. Do you
Okay.
think it would be appropriate to wait, or should we just have the public comments now and then get into the discussion of the fee schedule?
I think if your concern was hearing any comments on the remaining agenda items, we should probably do public comments now.
Okay.
But if you're really inclined to wait for public comments,
No, then we'll keep it as it is. So
Yeah.
we're at number 6 on the agenda, the public comments, including emails. I personally did not get any emails.
I managed to lose access to my account, but I'm sure there's nothing there.
Okay.
I don't think I had any parks-related communications since the last meeting.
Okay.
that I can
Okay.
recall.
None? Okay.
None.
And then, so at this point, public comments, anyone care to make a comment? I'm just going to grab the, so again, as you know, state your name and address and what you are to comment about, if you would, please.
Sure. Patricia Cicero, Director of the Jefferson County Land and Water Conservation Department. I also live in the city of Lake Mills at 517 College Street. I just wanted to come up and basically let you know that since the last meeting when I gave the presentation, I did send Eric the presentation slides as well as the DNR letter that reviewed the feasibility dredging report. So I assume that you received that. Certainly, if any member of the public wants that information, I can also provide that to them. I also wanted to introduce Colton Hutchinson. He is our new water resource management specialist who started on Monday. So I'm very happy for him to join us, and he'll be coming to future meetings having to do with the mill pond and can be an additional resource for information for you. So just wanted to say that tonight. Thank you.
Excuse me, so his title is?
Water Resource Management Specialist.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question, Patricia, and I'm going to put Colton on the spot potentially here. In that,
Welcome.
in that, is Colton maybe able to speak to the water quality, other issues that we might be coming or asking about at future meetings?
So I guess I don't know exactly what your question is about water quality, but we'll be working together. I have a lot of history on Rock Lake and the Mill Pond, so I'll continue to be here, but he'll be here as well as a resource. And if for some reason I'm not able to attend, he will.
Okay. I'm just, again, going back to the Strand Associates and
Yes.
some of the information they have on the dredging, I was just wondering if Colton was going to be able to add insight as to some of the details that are in the report.
Perhaps. It depends what your question is.
Yeah, okay. I know it's very broad, but I just wanted to get
Yes,
an idea.
I understand.
All right, thank you. And welcome, Colton. Any other public comment?
Good evening. My name is Andrew Palmer. I just want to take the opportunity to thank the Parks Board for the continued focus on the mill pond. I have been in communication with the director and with Lisa as well. Shared a little bit of the history and some of the dialogue that I think triggered the previous feasibility study. I feel confident that we're going to get to the right place. And again, want to thank you for your attention and diligence in getting a plan together.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other public comments? I personally had a public comment as someone speaking of the water flow coming from Rock Lake into the mill pond, going into the stream. And the person's comment was that there was no water coming into the mill pond from Rock Lake. And I guess there's a sand dam at the culvert, and so that was their concern. But personally, I went down to the stream here, and water is still flowing. Might not be visible, and there might be, so anyway, I know part of the discussion is the water has to always be flowing as best we can into the stream. But again, there was a comment that there is a sand dam and no water going in. So, any other public comments? All right, if not, let's move to item number 7, new business A, discussion recommendation on Parks Department fee schedule. And to Catherine's comment, I believe, and to Craig's question, is this from what we discussed as to the fees changes from the last meeting? And for clarification, I believe that's what that is about. It's the fee changes that we discussed and tentatively approved at the last meeting. So, Mike, or does someone have those in front of them that they can speak to, and then we can recommend approving them?
I can just read them off of the thing. Do you just want me to go through kind of line item with the?
Okay.
Will you give me that after?
Or
you have extras? No, I'll take it now if you have extra. I'm sorry I didn't bring one, my mistake.
So, Tim, I heard 2 issues kind of at the beginning of the meeting. One was the resolution 2301, which we have in front of us, which will ratify the discussion at the last meeting if it's approved. And then secondarily, Macrea, what I thought I heard you saying and what I saw in the director's report was additional discussion on other fee items.
Yes.
Do you intend to undertake that additional discussion tonight too, under this agenda item?
Yes.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
So the first one is to approve or discuss and approve what we had determined to be appropriate at the last meeting. So that's the first item that we want to list. And if you would.
Sure, I'll just list them off. The first section was the field preparation fees should be changed as follow. Monday through Friday daily fee change from $50 to $60. Saturday and Sunday daily fee change from $75 to $85. And then the second section was boat launch fees should be changed as follows. Daily fee for city residents should be changed from $7 to $8. Daily fee for non-city residents should be changed from $7 to $8. Daily fee for out-of-state residents should be changed from $10 to $15. Seasonal boat launch passes for city residents should be changed from $25 to $30. Seasonal boat launch passes for non-city residents should be changed from $50 to $60. Seasonal boat launch passes for out-of-state residents, would that be out-of-state non-residents?
There's city, non-city, and out-of-state for each of the 2 categories.
What item are you on?
So what's is out-of-state resident just someone out of state?
That is
Okay.
correct, yes.
Okay.
Non-Wisconsin resident.
Non-resident, okay. Sorry. Seasonal boat launch passes for out-of-state residents should be changed from $75 to $80, and replacement passes should be changed from $3 to $5 for all city residents, non-city residents, and out-of-state residents.
Thank you, Craig. So do we have discussion on the amounts?
Sounds like exactly what we talked about last time.
So do we have a motion to approve the amounts as suggested?
I will motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Brian. All right, so as read and noted, the changes will go into effect in 2024.
So do
we need to vote?
Well,
Yeah,
this is a recommendation to the council to make these changes.
yes,
So,
okay. Yeah, that's our recommendation. So the question is, do we need to have a vote as to approving the recommendations.
yeah.
So McCray, you motion that we approve them, and Bernie, you second the
Yes.
approval of the recommendation of the changes. All right, thank you. All right, so let's move to the second part of that is discussion of, sure. Yes, so let's vote, I guess. Thank you, Mike. Sure. So I vote yes.
I vote yes.
You name the next one.
McCray Baker,
I vote yes.
Bernadette Williams,
Yes.
Catherine Bishop.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Send it to you. Give it to you for the next meeting. Stand in.
Okay, we can figure out the process. Yeah, thank you. All right, let's continue on to the second part of that then. So these are the discussions and discussion and recommendation for any updates to the other fees. And is that something you're going to present, or where are we at with that?
I was under the interpretation that we would just be discussing or moving forward with the recommendation of 2301. Any further ones would be in subsequent Parks Board meetings when we review for the Parks Board. So that was my interpretation, is that it would just be this current resolution, moving forward to City Council, and then we discuss other associated parks fees like shelter reservations, et cetera, at like its own standalone agenda.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
good to
So
know.
you want it as a next agenda item, maybe? Okay.
Good to know. What was that, Drake?
I can repeat. They're reminded me of
Oh, thank you.
I was the one who gave the direction to that.
Do as you say, not as you do. Got it.
Bring my hearing aids.
So yeah, I was under the interpretation that we would just be moving forward the recommendation of 2301 resolution, and we would be discussing other parks-related fees at subsequent Parks Board meetings as a specific agenda item.
All right. Thank you. So then, on the agenda, let's move forward and a discussion of Strand Associates 9 January 2018 Mill Pond and Channel Dredging Feasibility Study. And of this, we've got 23 plans and specifications, 23 permit approval, dredging pre-application form, and then the wetland conservation activities, NR 353 individual permit. So, moving, you had to leave at 6:15, all right. Now, on this, I'm moving to the, go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say the attachments that you do have in item B here, these are specifically attachments that were associated with the Mill Pond Channel dredging, which was the approved permit recently from last year. The intent behind some of these attachments were just to give you an understanding as far as what documents and information is required of city staff when going through the permit application process. So hopefully seeing some of these documents that are required from the DNR will help you guys understand a little bit better the scope of the things that are required through a permitting process, and basically there for supplemental information. So if you do actually look at some of the things mostly being, let's see here, this will be the actual individual permit itself. This is basically the final stage, and this is NR 353, that wetland conservation activities attachment. This attachment is, for the most part, the final stage prior to actual permit approval. And hopefully by looking through some of the required information on this form, will kind of guide you through the process of understanding what would be required to dredge or further, I suppose, research potential dredging of the mill pond. So from my understanding, you guys can see the Strand Associates dredging feasibility study. What this does is give you a little bit of the background as far as the required information. So if you have any specific questions regarding this process or the actual permitting process itself, I'll do my best to answer as I went through it last year just for the dredging of the channel.
Did, I see that's the DNR, this be approval for the dredging. was titled to you, was that something you and city staff were able to submit for approval, or was a consultant needed to?
For the channel dredging itself?
Yes.
That was done by city staff. So that was done by myself as well as our consult engineer and assistant director of public works, Dwayne Vandermaas.
Okay.
Now he used multiple different resources to assist me through these things. Much consultation with the actual DNR representatives themselves, verifying questions and et cetera, helping me get through this process. I was always on the opposite end of the spectrum of this permit approval process, so this is my first time actually submitting a permit with the DNR, was the channel dredging itself, but it's a much different scope and understanding when you're on the opposite side of the permit process. So with it being within recent history from the past year, hopefully it can provide you a bit of insight regarding the process behind it.
Questions, comments?
Okay, so Eric, it sounds like you would use the same permit if we were going to dredge the mill pond or make a recommendation to do so. No, not the same permit.
Nope, this would be a separate individual permit. This process has begun, was submitted, and complete.
Well, I mean,
So
this form, sorry, you would use the same form
yes.
to request
Yep.
a permit? Okay, yeah,
Yep,
thank
it
you.
would
Sorry,
be the same
bad
form.
question.
So some of the things that we were actually exempt from, the scope of the project greatly determines the amount of materials that you have to submit to the DNR. The first thing that actually happens is you have to make the distinction, is this going to be covered under a general permitting process, or is this an individual permitting process? This, without any doubt, this will be considered an individual permit. I was exempt from further Army Corps of Engineers studies based on past information that was compiled during dredging of the mill pond channel itself. I would anticipate that since there has not been an Army Corps of Engineers study or further examination of the mill pond itself, that would most likely be required during a dredging of the mill pond. However, if I have not yet started the permitting process behind that, that's one of the things that actually gets flagged when we do the pre-application form, which is also in your attachments. So when the DNR representatives review that pre-application form, they will kind of decide how many people are going to be involved in it, what departments are they going to be involved at, and they will send it down the chain. So the first step would be basically our pre-application survey, which is one of your attachments if we do decide to move forward with dredging the mill pond. To put it in perspective, the application process and approval process for the channel dredging, and that's just from the actual mouth of the Rock Lake to the Ferry Street Bridge that's going to be occurring this winter. The approval process was approximately 18 months, with the actual writing of the permit itself and all the application materials being multiple weeks, if not slightly more. So it does kind of depend on the scope. The larger the scope of the project, the more required information the DNR will need.
That's right. So that was from when you first submitted the pre-application, that 18 months.
That was the actual application itself. So the entire application, from submittal of the true dredging application to the approval of the dredging application, and that approval is one of your attachments that you have. I received in April of 24 of this year, is approximately 18 months from submittal date to approval date.
And did you say, I'm sorry, that, so once you send in the pre-application, the DNR, would they then decide, yeah, we need to have the Corps of Engineers, and they would contact Corps of Engineers, or do you have to do that?
What will happen is they will say that Army Corps of Engineer involvement is required on this project. It is up to the actual application submitter to move forward with that process.
Do you have, since we didn't do it before, do you have any idea how long it takes for an Army Corps of Engineers application and their review?
I do not, as I've not yet been involved in a project that requires Army Corps of Engineers for the city. Like I said, it definitely depends on the scope of the project. On ones that I've worked on in the past with the DNR, the Army Corps of Engineer process was also done in conjunction with DNR further evaluation, so they are actually done at the same time for the most part. But then again, it greatly determines, or kind of depends on the amount of the scope of the project. I had applications for these processes were moved forward in a number of months, and I've seen ones that are still in stasis upon being submitted in 2019. So it does kind of depend on the scope of the project. Yes.
I believe I saw in the channel dredging, I guess the waste or the sediment pulled out was going to get disposed at a city park. Was that correct, or?
Not a city park, but it's
Stockpile?
city-owned property.
Okay.
So city-owned property is, we have to figure out a refuse site, or basically a dumping site that is, we're not spreading any potential contaminants, we're not spreading any aquatic invasive species. It's basically a contained disposal site of the refuse material for this. It's on city property, it's actually to the west side of Industrial Avenue from Wallace Park. Right now, it's currently being used as like a fill location.
As a what location?
As a fill location.
Okay.
So any construction that's happening throughout the city, it's been pre-approved as far as being like sediment disposal site, a fill location. And it was determined that this site, if we have adequate erosion control methods and runoff methods in place already, that it would be adequate for the channel dredging materials.
Okay, so just one thing that I wanted to bring up that might complicate the permitting and just the, I guess, the logistics of it. There'd be tenfold amount of sediment removed for the entire mill pond dredge. So I don't know if that would be able to be disposed on city property, or if a completely different setup would be needed.
Yep, that's kind of where my question comes in, or at least some of the things that I would like you guys to discuss about, is this is being done by city staff just for this channel dredging. I think this would involve a specialty dedicated source to actually do this. This would require, at least from my understanding, this to go out to bid. This would be a project that would be bid by the city. This would be its own standalone project. These people may very well have the responsibility of covering the permitting processes themselves, but as far as actual waste disposal, that absolutely is correct. So if we have to have a pre-approved, predetermined, erosion-controlled area for the disposal or the refuse material from dredging, we would anticipate this to be substantially more if it were to be dredged. But at least the way that I see, and maybe Drake can correct me if I'm wrong too, but if the mill pond were to be dredged, I see this being as a contracted, capital-funded project moving forward. We can look for any potential grant funding or external sources, but this would be a standalone project.
Well, in the report, part of it was if there is going to be like total dredging, there was some things in there about you could find agricultural land and such that you might be able to move it to, because from what I could read, there were not a danger of contaminants, heavy metals or such, according to the report.
Tim's correct. So, I mean, it's the reason why this spot was chosen. It was already a site that had erosion control things in place. It was basically a fairly easy, low-risk option for us to use that as a dumping location.
So one question I have with the fill, because you're indicating it would be a lot to dredge a whole mill pond versus just the channel, is getting rid of the dredged material something that we would have to pay for if it's not used in the city, or is it something that we could be paid to sell? Like basically we could sell it to somebody who needs fill. Like, is there a market?
I think that would
like
need further research. Whether it can be used as far as like agriculture fertilizer, I'm not quite sure. I know that it doesn't have any, it hasn't been determined to have. There's no contaminants in it. It's not like we're getting rid of any dangerous materials. Now, whether it can be sold as fertilizer or easily disposed of for free, I'm not quite sure. I think it would need further research. I think the first thing is we need to figure out the scope is my biggest question. Does this scope include just having or restoring navigable access through the mill pond, or does it include the actual surface area, water body of the mill pond, are the biggest questions that I have, and that'll greatly determine, I think, the way that we approach this project.
So in your approval for the channel, or submittal for approval for the channel dredging, was disposal of waste part of the approval process? Like, did you have to submit what you were going to do with the, I can't call it waste, the sediment?
Spoil.
Yes.
Yep, those spoils had to be predetermined. We had to have an actual disposal plan. As far as getting rid of these materials, we have to have sealed containers or sealed trucks. When we are removing this, we can't just put it in the dump truck and get rid of it. It does have to be actual sealed containers within this dump truck itself to get rid of it.
Okay.
So, So it's all part of the plan. Like I said, it was an extensive amount of time to go through this application process, but I have one prior experience doing this, so I don't have much to gauge from that. But like I said, the main question is we need to, or as a board, I would recommend determining the scope of this project.
Any other questions? Thank you. Good.
And if any questions come up on any of these attachments, I'm more than happy to come up and try my best to answer.
I just have a quick question that ties into also public comment in that the culvert as it is now is 10 feet wide underneath the bridge.
I wouldn't be able to recall right off the top of my head, but the actual expansion of that culvert tube for Ferry Street would be a separate project for the actual Ferry Street reconstruction, not a portion of a mill pond dredging project.
Okay. Because I'm just going by what's on the hatched amounts, and if
What's on that drawing? I actually did have permission to use a prior dredging permit for the channel drawings, so that is actually an older drawing. However, it is still applicable because the project scope was the same, so I did not have to rewrite that document. But there hasn't been any further changes on the Ferry Street culvert since this drawing was done.
Okay. All right.
May I ask a question? You mentioned, is that a Ferry Street project? No, is that like when they choose a street that they're going to redo?
Yes.
Any idea when that's slated for? Sometime in the future?
Yes.
Good enough.
Okay. Any other questions for Eric or comments? And this, you say the project is going to be going on sometime this winter?
Yeah. Yep. So the project scope, or at least the project parameters and time frame, definitely comes under the review of an ER review. That's an endangered resources review. We have to do this during dormant. That's ER review. ER.
What does that stand for?
Endangered resources review.
Oh.
So when these permits are basically applied for, we have to go through an ER review process with the DNR. What that does is that determines, are we impacting species with their flora, fauna? Are we disrupting them in their natural habitat when we're doing this project? So an ER review will require certain, for this instance, fish biologists and water management specialists from the DNR review the channel, determine the amount or the time frame that would be the least amount of impact to these species, or least likelihood of impact to these species, and gave us a, from this start point date to this end point date is our window that we can complete this project.
Any other questions or comments on item B as it specifically relates to Eric's report? If not, thank you, Eric. Then let's, if we would, item C, which is discussion on creation of a mill pond presentation, present state, costs, and feasibility of pond dredging, and that is going to be tied to the report that was done in 2018. Now, just a couple of things that we talked about at the last meeting is that the costs and such that are in here, and I think we asked Eric, but I also verified that the inflation in the last 5 years has been about 4.84%. So whatever we have as far as numbers on there, we're going to add, just to round things up, add another 25% to them for the 5 years.
Well, so that's 4.8 per year.
4.8 per year, yes. 4.84% per year is what the costs have been. That was as of like 2022 or something like that. So I'm just extrapolating them and I doubt that they're going to go down. Well, and so that's about, part of it in that. And then if there's any specific comments in the items, and I'm just going to take my packet apart so we can talk a bit about some of the items. The first part of the report are the letter to Steve Wilkie, the city manager, which would now be Drake, as far as the letter going to that.
From the DNR?
That was one.
from
No, this is
Strand.
the Strand,
Okay.
actual Strand letter.
Okay.
Right? And again, I can't remember how many pages it was. I think 12 or something like that. But that was just a depth of that, some of the recommendations. Then the next packet was the legend of where they did the sediment locations, the outlet, storm sewer, the parcels, and then the contours that go into the mill pond. And again, that's a packet of Gray's got color.
That's
I
this
don't know
one.
if we have the same thing. Do we?
Yeah, you
We do? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, those are just attachments. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the attachment. That one wasn't labeled as a number in it. It was just all the photos. Then we have attachment A. Attachment A has the what they call it, grab samples and all the different particle size and the analytical stuff that was done by CT Laboratories. And again, this is what I got out of attachment A is that they basically sampled down to, I think, up to like 4 feet, but there was no major concerns with contaminants in the samples. The attachment B are some of the proposals for what they're going to remove. They have the scenario where they're moving all the sediment. The next one is removing sediment down to an elevation of 824.03 feet, which is 4 feet below summer minimum rock lake water level, and scenario 3, remove sediment down to 2503, which is 3 feet below. And then that packet is with pictures and side diagrams and such. So that's what that item is. Attachment C is the feasibility studies and projected costs. Again, these costs that you see in there are from 2018, so we would need to add inflationary projections to those costs. And then attachment D is more of the proposal for what existing pedestrian bridge would need to be raised, and this is Eric, Drake, is this what we call the Ferry Street project, the one on attachment D, which is adding or expanding the height of the bridge and such?
Yes, so that's what I was referring to with the Ferry Street project.
Okay, so that would be
Separate.
attachment D.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for that. So just to move forward with this, and again, one of our assignments was to read this and have some insight and input, and that if we're, again, our goal here is to have a recommendation or at least a presentation or an update to the City Council in December. Any high-level comments that you have from reading the feasibility study as to your thoughts? I know I'll start right away. One of the comments was, and we've had input in the past about people wanting to gain access to the mill pond and the downtown, and there was a projection of what that economic impact that would have. And I believe the numbers at the time were something like there would be an impact, and again, I'm rounding this number off, let's say $20,000 per month, I believe. But if you do the math on the cost of it, it's about a 50-year payback. So that part of it was, I thought, interesting. It's basically none. But any other comments on the basically three options that they had listed in the feasibility study?
I
Yes,
had
Mike.
one, I noticed that in the first page, the
First page of the Strand
first
report?
page, yep,
Okay.
after number 3, and they talk about no parent material could be recovered and only sediment samples from mill pond and channel were retrieved. So is that a problem with, I'm wondering down the line with approval, if we can't say we really don't know what we're going to scoop out when we scoop it?
If that, is this what you highlighted here?
Yeah.
About that
Yeah.
parent material would not stay in the 4-foot core sampler? And what again, we could put this to our experts in the audience or Eric and such. I believe it's a tube that goes down there, and when they tried to bring it up, that sand and gravel wouldn't stay in the tube.
Right, and I'm wondering if the fact that we don't then have an actual sample of what we're going to dredge, if that's a problem?
From what I read, no, that,
Not a problem.
from what they were saying, to when they went down, and the core what they brought up
Yeah.
was
Okay.
fine. But they just couldn't get the actual down to the gravel and sand. The rest of it was sediment. So that was page 1. Page 2 on the dredging feasibility study. They talk about the sediment depths in the channel range from 1/2 foot to 2 feet. And then the sediment depths in the pond itself range from 1/2 foot to 4 feet. So, and then as far as it goes to the 4 scenarios for dredging were analyzed. So any comments on, and I think this ties into what Patricia presented last time, that the samplings and where they would do some stuff, that the water depth and the such are varied. But the sediment depths also vary.
Another just quick comment that this was done in 2018. Not only will be inflation with the cost, there could also potentially be more sediment. I don't know how dynamic and how much more sediment is washing in every year, but there could also be just more volume of sediment in the 5 years that it's been.
Yeah, that's a good point, Macrea. One thing I noticed in a couple of the pictures they showed, particularly of the Ferry Street Bridge, was I've only been here since 2020, so I don't have any background knowledge of what the mill pond used to look like. But that picture looks very different from what I know the Ferry Street Bridge to look like now, just in terms of elevation of the water. So I think you're right. There could actually be more sediment than we anticipate.
I feel like my time here since 2020 as well, just the channel itself is way more clogged up.
Yep.
Than it was previously.
There was, comment both in the report about the degradation of the wall and the riprap, both one in the channel itself and then on Rock Lake and Bartles Beach Park. That's part of it. I have a question to maybe Patricia or they put sand on Bartles Beach, correct? I mean, it's added to the beach.
Eric can talk to this too.
All right. And so do we, as a city, have any idea what impact that is having as that gets stirred up when people using it and floating down into the channel?
Yep, looking at past aerials, I can confidently say that sand goes somewhere. It washes off the beach, and from the aerials that I have seen, it washes along that seawall, and what we're actually seeing at the mouth of the channel, where it meets with Rock Lake, is a buildup of sand.
Okay.
So what I'm hoping to do, at least along with the Sandy Beach development as well and the Bartles Beach Seawall project, in some kind of way to try to contain some of that sand, or at least erosion control methods. I've done a couple things within the past 2 years as far as enlarging grain size, limiting the amount of sand that we do deliver to the beaches. Instead of 44 tons annually, greatly reduce the amount of sand that goes onto these beaches as much as possible. But from the research that I've done, that sand seems to be washing along the seawall to the mouth of the actual channel of the mill pond.
So this happens like in every beach imaginable. I mean, South Florida undertakes huge dredging operations every year to replace the sand as it washes up and continues northward. So do we think this is a new issue that Bartles Beach sand is moving into the channel opening? I mean, how was this taken care of 30 years ago? It doesn't seem like we have that history to know, or this seems to be like a new problem for some reason, and I'm not sure why. Is that the case, or have we always had the sand washing up into the channel?
From what I've seen, it's been a recurring issue.
Okay. Like over the course of like 100 years of Bartles Beach history, has it been recurring?
100
I know you're not that
I
old,
could
so
speak
you
in the
can't say
last
that, but-
20, at least the last 28, I can say on a nearly annual basis, sand has been replaced on Bartles Beach and Sandy Beach.
Right, but then the channel, I mean, it seems like the channel has been more navigable in the past than it has over the past 5 years. Is that the case? Has the channel always been filled in with sand?
I think one of the issues is the recurrence of drought years that we've had in recent history as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think based on our 2021 drought and 2023 drought, it just becomes much more apparent.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that silt, sand, sediment is building up. Of course, natural vegetation and everything else does degrade and has more silt and sediment. There is washing into the channel, into the mill pond from other silt and sediment. I think it is just much more apparent on years that we have lower water levels in recent history. So I think it's a combination of both things.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of things contributing, so it's just figuring out.
So I think between the past couple years on record, with the low water levels, I mean, you can see mill pond right now, you can actually see the base of some vegetation out there that I have not seen within the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's a combination of both factors, I think.
And Eric, and this is more of a question for a presentation to be made to the city council as to what may be involved, because right now our target is for the mill pond, proposals. But in the bigger picture of things, Rock Lake is also part of this whole process of sand and flow and use and protection of the aquatic vegetation that is in that whole area from basically Bartles Beach down and past the inlet or outlet, whatever you call it, to the channel. And so I think that's not something the city can do, but that'd be something the DNR would have to consider.
At least in my scope of my position, it's something that I would at least like to research when we have these restoration projects like Sandy Beach happening. I would like to see what potential erosion, like additional erosion control methods we can do to preserve some of the sand on city property to limit the washing of that sand. Like I said, I've tried a few options, whether it be increasing the grain size. I think that is a discussion for further. But I will continue to research what erosion control methods we can do, whether it be natural riprap installed in the shoreline rather than a concrete wall. There are multiple different things that can be researched that will be continued to research. Like I said, it's fairly irrefutable looking at the aerial photos that the more sand we put on the beach, the sand, it does go somewhere, and it does go along the, basically, specifically for Bartles Beach, it does wash along that seawall towards the mouth of the channel.
Does anyone have expertise on the type of sand? I mean, is there like a more coarse sand that will stay in place versus?
I did that change. That was the first thing I did in 2021, was increase the granular size of those sands. So there are different courses of sand that you can use, either where that sand is sourced from different pits. So when they do different quarries, when they have different grades of sand, you can find one that is more coarse. There's stuff that's almost like egg fine, just what it's referred to as, which is very, very fine sand, which I think is what was used before. just because it's soft and people like it on the beach. The stuff that I've used now is much more coarse. It seems to be more erosion resistant. I haven't had any complaints as far as the different granular size on the beaches, but at least what I've seen is it has been more resistant to erosion. I think there are far more methods that can be researched to limit erosion, but at least it's one of the preventative measures that we've done in the last couple of years.
Yeah. It seems to me that anybody that's been in that water, depending on, especially years ago prior to you, it would get pretty browny gray from just churned up. And I think that has to go somewhere, and it's when it slows down and gets by, I think it's dropping somewhere. Versus if it would just be a heavier grit, for lack of a better term, it might stay in place more. But I
And that
gotta put that to the
seems,
experts.
and that seems to be the case over the past couple of years, is that increase in the grain size has limited erosion.
And just an aside, kudos to the park department. When I first saw them bring in the truck and dump the sand, I fully expected to see city workers there spreading it. Much smarter. They let the little kids, who are virtual ants, and they're swarming over that thing, and a week later, it's gone. It's spread out. So smart.
Eric, was that your idea? I think that
We
was your
do,
doing.
Very
we do
smart.
move the sand
And
a
they
little
love
bit, but especially at Bartles Beach, we'll leave a pile or two here, and people absolutely love it,
Oh,
which is
God,
pretty
yeah.
neat. So, yes, we do that intentionally,
I thought I remembered you saying that.
not just to save labor, but kids love it, so.
So looping back to McCrae's question as to the amount of sediment that has been added in the last 5 years, I would say that before the slurry of that sort of sand and that mud or whatever we want to call it was also adding to the sediment that would be going into Mill Pond to whatever degree.
What I would be able to do is the only things that I could confirm is the last 2 years of purchases. What I can do is I can confirm those amounts. I know it has at least been discussed between our departments, I think. The actual tonnage that's been delivered on locations, that tonnage was, I believe, more than cut in half from the previous years of which sand has been delivered, which I think is positive for the most part. But any years subsequent to that, I wouldn't be able to verify how much tonnage was placed on the beaches. I just know that it was around double what has been placed in the last couple of years.
I don't think we're going to be able to quantify the additional amount, but just kind of general comment that there could be more.
Yeah. But I have noticed that the sand is different, and that does make a difference when it comes to slurries and what moves. Bernie, you were going to make a comment?
No, I totally agree with Craig. We were talking earlier, so yeah, just about the amount.
So, and I think as a board, we just have to be comfortable with that. We're doing our best with what we've got, but I think someone asked, how long will it last? If they do dredge, how long is that going to last? Well, so much of it depends on water action and use and such, but could be researched, I guess. So anything else as far as the Mill Pond thoughts, the recommendations? Thank you, Eric. Where we want to go as to, what is our perusal?
If there's nothing more about the report, can we talk about the city council resolution and just exactly what we are tasked to do?
If that's most certainly. Which one are you speaking of there?
2341A.
I have some more comments on the report, but basically they're all addressed in the letter from the DNR. So I'll just defer until we get, because we're going to discuss that, the DNR letter that kind of critiqued the report, or the dredging study.
I don't know if I had the DNR letter that.
I think Patricia sent it after our last meeting.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I defer.
Let's talk about your thing first, because
Well, it really follows this whole thing. Like,
Okay.
for instance, when they were talking about reducing, everything was positive, which is fine, but in my little notes before I saw that, I said, well, there's always negative effects. What are they? And then they seem to make lots of assumptions that I just wasn't sure were founded. And that's much more cogently set forth in the DNR letter.
Okay. So is that going to work for you, McCrae?
as far as still want to talk about this.
Yeah,
but-
Right, let's do that first.
Deferring this and
Okay.
doing that first?
Yeah. So I don't really see in here, it seems like the city council wants an update / report every 6 months. I guess I don't see, are we giving them a final recommendation as far as to proceed with application for dredging a channel through the mill pond, application for dredging the entire mill pond, or doing nothing? I don't see, like, is that in the end what we're supposed to give city council? Because I don't see that in this resolution.
Yeah, so you're asking like what is our final product supposed to look like to city council?
Yes.
Okay. What I had envisioned, and I guess you're right, it's not specifically spelled out, was that this board would make a written report with our findings of what the resolution asks us to look at. So, for instance, section 1 of the resolution says Parks Board will review potential short-term and long-term maintenance needs. Okay, so then we need to say what are short-term needs, what are long-term needs, and put that in a written recommendation ultimately to the council. So I had started outlining what a report would look like. I haven't gotten very far. I had intended maybe for the next meeting to have like an outline with bullet points of what we should be answering based on this resolution. But what I also hear you asking, Macrea, is what is our report to the council next month, in 6 months? Are you also asking that?
I think I'm at a good place as far as what, and we'll discuss it, I'm assuming, today, about what our report is going to be in December. But as I was more so end product, what is city council looking from for us? It doesn't really seem, it's an update every 6 months. Is that into, for the next 3 years, or?
No, that's until we make a final written report with our recommendations based on what the needs of the mill pond are and what the city should be doing.
And a recommendation for what?
Whether we dredge it, whether we don't dredge it, whether we take out the vegetation. So part of that is like we need to take in public comment with what the issues are, and then as a board make recommendations to rectify those issues, or we say city council, you should do nothing, you should leave it as is. I think the recommendations could really span the gamut of whatever we see and want to take up within the parameters of resolution 23-41A.
Okay, so in the end, we are going to be making a decision as the Parks Board what we are going to recommend to City Council as far as the dredge, not the dredge, what to dredge.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, to dredge. And dredging, I see it as being just one thing. Like, for instance, some of the background I have heard from citizens are like, that marshy portion of the southern part of the mill pond, there's now marsh, used to be clear. Do we go back as far as clearing that? I don't know. I think that's something within the realm of what we have been tasked to consider.
Okay.
Just to give an example of like what is up for consideration.
If I may, I kind of thought that rather than us saying, okay, you should only dredge, don't touch the area with the cattails, just do this area and to this depth, I thought it was going to be more like, okay, section A, if we do the whole thing, here's what it's going to cost, we think, here's what it's going to do, here's what's going to be required. If we do half of it, here, and so we don't really make a specific recommendation, you guys should do this, but rather we say, here's your 3 basic options, here's what they're going to cost, here's how long it will last, you guys make your choice. Or am I wrong?
No, because I think the feasibility study already kind of does that. And so the feasibility study from Strand from 2018 is a piece of the puzzle that we use to make a recommendation to say, okay, you could dredge the whole thing. You can dredge what the feasibility study says calls it a more narrow channel to get from the boat launch to the channel at Ferry Drive Bridge, right? Like to make that connection. The feasibility study also says you could dredge what I'm going to call inroads from the main part of the mill pond to individual property owners' locations to make that then accessible to those property owners on the mill pond. So I think our goal should be to take what is in the feasibility study that gives those costs. We can reference it, certainly, but then narrow that down more specifically for the council so that they know, like, after we've looked at all of the materials, after we've had public comment, so the council has a more narrow direction to go.
So here's what we recommend you do.
Yes,
Okay.
based on the feasibility study, based on input from,
Okay.
Patricia and her group, and based on everything we hear from the citizens, to really take all that in for the council to narrow their scope of what they're looking at, and then we can give them a cost breakdown for that recommendation.
Okay, perfect.
Based on everything, so they can say, yes, we want to spend this cost, no, we don't, or they can say, Parks Board, go back and look at something more specific and granular to give us more information if they desire that.
Okay.
That's sort of how I see the process playing out.
Yeah, and that's how I initially thought about it, but then I was rereading this recently again, and I didn't see anything about provide a specific recommendation on what to do with the mill pond. It just
Right.
seems to say provide a report, but I mean, what
Yeah.
you said all is what I was thinking, and it makes sense. It just wasn't clearly written in there.
Yeah, and I think from section 1, looking at short-term and long-term needs, and then moving into section 2, preparing the report for the council, making those recommendations with associated costs is where we're at. Because they already have the feasibility study, but then it's like, well, what of those options do we do? It was my interpretation of the sticking point that council was at, which is why the recommendation is with the Parks Board.
And with that, I believe they're looking for us to give them idea as to what the public has commented on. And I think the other thing that for us, for our presentation at the December meeting would be, here's our plan. We're going to do, we've done this, we've heard this, we've read the report, and our next plan is to have public input. Our plan is also to give more information on some costs and benefits and moving forward. To that 6-month deal, it is my understanding they would like to have some sort of report as to where we are as far as our findings from public input and other research, every quarter. But I might be. We can get on to the city council agenda any time. We just have to give them a week or so to say, here's what we're going to talk about. So. But to back up a little bit, I think our big thing right now is that here's what we've done, here's some of the assumptions, is that these things are there. I don't think we are looking at any time to expand the present water surface area.
Yeah, I don't think that was discussed at all in the
No.
Strand report.
By that you mean getting into the cattail area? Okay.
Right. I don't think that's part of our scope. I know people have commented, but I don't think that's anywhere near where we're talking. I think right now the people I've been here for, some of the meetings regarding the property owners on the pond itself, they want to go more to, I think what Catherine's saying, they want access to the channel, would it be, or the pond if it were to be completely dredged. But I think that's, one is, again, minimum $4 million for that project to do all the things that Strand said. And I think the minimum on it is half that cost.
Yeah, we were discussing before, I threw the 25% on top of some of the costs. This was, which one was this for? Remove all sediment mill pond, it was just shy of $5 million. So that was, and that's, the 25% more than previous, so.
Right. So those are all, that's on, I don't know what page number it is on the Strand report, but those are all things that, there had to be a reason for them to push this back to, getting more detail, because you're looking at a tremendous amount of money. And as I said, when their report as to what the payback is for the city itself, assessments to property owners or just the whole thing is going to be.
Well, I'm not trying to cut you off, but the feasibility report did also mention grant funds that are available, it seems like on some kind of rotating basis. So identifying an amount that could be available to us to help offset that cost might be beneficial for the council as well to include
Yes, yes.
in the report. Because I don't think it said the amount of the grants. So that's something to go out and find. Tim, for this agenda item 2, we had discussed at the last meeting who would present an update to the council at the next meeting. I had said I could do it, and I would just give kind of what you said, like, here's what we've done at the last couple meetings on the agenda items, and here's what we're going to do next, particularly in giving a date for a special hearing or a public hearing. I just want to, this is more administrative. I may not physically be at the next council meeting.
I was requested to do the presentation.
Okay.
So
I just wanted to let you know what my schedule was, because I didn't know who you wanted to do it or how you wanted to approach
I was
that.
asked, and
Okay.
again, that's part of the thing we can work about. According to Lisa, it can be oral, fairly short report, here we are, we got lots more to do, or we need to have more graphs and such. That'd be something we want to know so they can get them printed and access and stuff
Okay.
like that. But yes, thank you for that.
Got it, yeah.
Right now, again, the options are December 5th or December 19th to be on the agenda for what our initial thoughts are.
Do we want to discuss a date to have a public hearing right now so that we can tell the council here's what we're thinking and start getting city staff ready for that?
I think that's
I think
wise.
so.
Okay.
Does this have to be separate from a Parks Board meeting, or can we kind of have a together thing, maybe January, February, I mean, quiet months after the holidays?
A long meeting.
To answer your question, it could be part of a Parks Board meeting.
Okay. I don't know if that's what people are interested in or not, but.
No, I think that's wise. We just have to be, and someone asked us a question about, my understanding is we are going to be meeting up in the chambers going forward. And Eric, did you say December we start?
We'll have to confirm a potential changing time for court, because currently on Wednesday nights there is court at the city council chambers. What we're proposing right now is to keep our advertised and scheduled Parks Board time. So it's always the third Wednesday of the month at 5:30. We're hoping to use council chambers during that time, but we don't have a confirmed reschedule for court yet. We're working forward to it, or like working towards it.
So we will know this when?
We will know where our meeting location is for the next Parks Board meeting prior to the agenda being posted.
Okay.
So, Macria, I agree with you also that it should be after the holidays. I think our next meeting on the 20th, people are going to be, school's probably getting out, people are going on vacation. I would like in January, for our meeting in January, to be the public hearing as well. And I don't know if we, maybe start 30 minutes early at 5, or if we just start at normal time, 5:30, and say, the public hearing is at 5:30 at the Parks Board meeting for an hour. And then if we're done sooner, then we just move right into our regularly scheduled meeting is one way to handle it.
Mm-hmm. One, I would like to keep it consistent with the 5:30 start time.
Sure.
And then as to the other part of it, I think that'd be fine. And whatever the input is, then we could use that input. Mm-hmm. I know in the past when we had input regarding Sandy Beach, we had the people and they came in and presented and they were limited to 3 minutes and what their such, which would be fine. I do think as part of the meeting tonight, we want to discuss what we want from how are we going to frame the public comment? Are we going to give them, these are 3 options, which ones do you want? But at this point, I don't know what the costs are and who would bear the costs of Mill Pond improvements, specifically to the dredging to the piers. I did a little bit of research as to, I know in the document, they want it to be 2.5, 3 feet as far as, passability. When I talked to some marina owners, they said that most boats, pontoons and such, they need a minimum draft with the boat and the motor, the prop, of about 1.5 feet. And that's assuming that they've got the tiller up. If they have the motor down all the way, you're looking at about 2.5 feet that they need to move. So anyway, that's a little bit about the minimum for the dredging to go to the things would have to be at least 1.5 feet, 2 feet. So, but it is like, I think in the report, they said it had to be 3 feet or whatever, the draft on some of these things, and I go, it doesn't need, we don't have anything in that mill pond that's gonna need that much draft to get through. We're not bringing barges into the mill pond.
So I think we could use this report to kind of help guide the different options that we have. So if I remember correctly, we have dredge the channel, but that's a done deal now, so we can eliminate that. Sorry, let me just get there. Oh, here we go. So they give estimates for mill pond, total channel and mill pond, 50-foot channel, or 50-foot wide channel. I think that was just from the boat launch to the actual channel that is being dredged. And then, did they give an option too for just access to homeowners' piers?
I don't. What page are you on there?
Is that
That's
page
third
3?
Yeah,
I don't actually remember seeing that.
I think that's the one. That's when you're talking about, right, McCray, where they have channel, then mill pond, then total.
Yep.
Yep. It's third page, I think.
So if we're following this, we would basically have, I guess, do nothing as an option. Mill pond, channel from boat launch to mill pond. So,
and then
3
I
options.
believe that the entire dredging would get to the issue of getting things to the,
Yeah, that was the whole thing up to like the edge.
correct,
Yeah, around the piers of the
correct,
homeowners.
right. And that, of course, is the most expensive option.
Yeah. That's-
If I'm hearing your question also, is that there were some places when I was looking, they do channels to the piers, but I don't think that was in any of these proposals.
Is that just from the owners using it? Or are homeowners like actually dredging their own pier areas?
I don't think they can do that, but I don't know what yes, please. Could you ask the question again, McCray, then
Yeah.
you can respond?
Is it the channels to homeowners' piers being dredged just by continued use of their own boats, or are homeowners actually taking action, dredging their piers, around their piers?
If that's an option for them to do that?
Are they doing that?
I
I'm
have
assuming
no
it's not
idea if anybody's doing it. If somebody is wanting to dredge in front of their own property, they would be required to get a DNR permit for that activity. I know, I believe last time when I was here, I did comment that on other lakes, when there's a lot of aquatic vegetation, if somebody uses their boat regularly on the same line, they will keep it open in terms of aquatic vegetation. Depending on the particle size of the sediment, they could potentially also have it be a little bit of dredging by their motor. The other thing I don't think I said last time, that I don't know if this is where the 3 feet comes in, is that DNR has a pier planner guidance for length of piers. And basically, length of piers can be to a depth needed to moor your boat or 3 feet, whichever is greater. And so everybody who is currently on the mill pond can extend their pier lengths to get to a deeper water in order to be able to moor their boat and access the mill pond in the lake.
But she said, so currently the DNR allows you to have either your pier go out to where you have it deep enough to float your boat or to where it hits 3 feet.
Yes,
right?
I think it's whatever is greater. So
Whichever's
I
greater.
can send Eric that pier planner for him to
Okay.
send out to everybody. But if you go on the DNR website and type in pier planner, you're going to find it.
Because that would affect whether or not, how far you'd have to dredge the, let's call them passages, if they're able to extend their their pier out.
But, yeah, and I think that's something we can
We have to look
research,
at.
because I think that might be, and again, I'm just conjecturing here because I'm not an expert, that's one of the reasons why if they expanded it to 50 feet versus it's a channel. Patricia, Eric, do you know how wide is the surface from the channel itself, from the boat launch to the culvert? How wide is it going to the Lake Street property owners?
Are you referring from like the actual boat launch piers itself to the South Ferry Street Bridge?
No, not to the bridge, to the people on the lake that have the piers. I mean, how, is that 100 feet from the channel?
I'd have to do an aerial overlay and get an actual measurement on it. My guess is approximately 100 feet. Very rough guess.
You're talking about where their piers would go out to where there currently is a boat channel going from the fire station out to the thing.
Yeah,
right.
From a person to basically launch their boat from their pier to get to a navigable channel.
Right, okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'd have to do an aerial overlay on GIS, but I mean, I wouldn't guess any more than 100 feet.
And just from my walking along or being on there, most of the piers are boat length. They might be 20 feet.
Yep.
And to Patricia's comments and all that, I think they could, they could go out, they could take that pier all the way out to wherever the 3 feet is.
Since there is none, they could go all the way.
Well, and again, that would be, I don't know of anyone that actually uses the mill pond other than to access, fishing on the mill pond or accessing Rock Lake. I mean, I don't see people out there canoeing or kayaking itself in the mill pond. It might be because it's too shallow in certain spots or whatever. So if people were to put piers out there, the homeowners, your Andes, if they were to put piers out there, they're like, I mean, that'd be something we'd have to discuss, but I don't think that's going to affect the mill pond use per se.
Well, to your point about kayaks, there was that little fishing pier on the mill pond side. If you go from like Ferry Drive, Bartles Beach area, I think it was removed. But then also there in the feasibility report was recommendation to have a kayak launch pad on that mill pond side. So there may not be more recently kayakers, but I think in the past it probably was used for kayaking. I think they're also trying to reduce where people launch their kayaks on the Bartles Beach side. They would rather have people launch on the mill pond side. So we do have to consider that there may be other uses for the mill pond, except, there may be other uses more than what we've just seen in the last few years.
Yeah.
So we do have to prepare for those recommendations.
Yes. I still go back, though, that I think the people that are launching their kayaks into the mill pond aren't to go into the mill pond. They're getting in there to get to Rock Lake.
Okay, I see.
Or to get to the channel to get to downtown to go to a restaurant or such.
That I don't know
Yeah.
one way or another. So.
And I know a couple of people that have lived on Mill Pond, and from them, they had smaller boats and they had kayaks, and they said they never had any issues. But that's not the recommendation that's in here about, access to pontoons in the downtown. But he was not, or both of them were not concerned about the depth per se for their uses.
For kayaks.
For kayaks and
Okay.
for such, right, and small 4 horsepower motors.
Yeah, I can speak to that. We've kayaked down there when you could get in before the sand dam, and that was no problem going down what I call the passage from the Ferry Street Bridge to the fire station. You go down there and you could come back. If you wanted to expand that, it would be harder because that's a lot of vegetable matter.
I guess just to back up though, I think I appreciate Patricia sharing that. If we dredge the whole thing by the recommendation, the most expensive thing, then the piers can stay the length that they are. They're going to have the 3 feet that they need and all that. If we do the 50-foot wide swath, people might choose to do nothing with their piers, but they could go out to that more dredged area to get access to the lake. Or if we just keep with just the channel, from what I understand, if they want to put out the money, they could have a 75, 80-foot pier that goes out there, which aesthetically I think would be not so good, but
Yeah.
I don't know what we could do about it. So those are some things as far as us for use and all that to recommend. The other thing that for us is the three options as far as the depth, as far as dredging it down, all sediment, dredging it down to the basically a 2-foot level or down to the 3-foot level. And this goes back to the things that Eric commented. It's, the volume gets huge. Where do you put this stuff? On the other side of it, and this goes back to others' comment, is if you don't do it right and then it fills in another whatever years,
Yeah.
it doesn't get less expensive. So those are all things. The other thing, and it's not in the proposal, but again, I don't know if it's something we want to get from what I've read on other mill pond or pond room, they did what's called scalloping, meaning they I guess it's the best place for the water level is like 1.5 feet or deeper, so that you don't have sediment growth and weed growth and all that. But they would have so that wherever the channel was, it would be shallower, but then it'd be deeper, then it kind of goes, as a lack of a better term, a scallop. And that might be another option we could put to people that would both get at the issue of water quality, the depth, but also for the vegetation for the
Can you
fish.
expand on that? I'm not sure I followed that.
I'd almost said, did anybody, you know what I'm talking about, where they were talking about, they basically have like a berm that of it's shallow water that weeds, like cattails can be on, and then it's deeper water where they access to their piers, and they just were saying that's kind of how they got at. It wasn't just making a big old bathtub. They were basically saying they get fingers so that there would be access, and then these fingers had like aquatic things and willows and all sorts of stuff.
So actually engineering it subaquatically, if you will, or
yes,
subsurface.
Yes, but again, that's not in any of the reports. But I know that was something that someone brought up. Say, why don't they make it more, a blend of both for the homeowner but also for the aquatic stuff. But again, all that stuff gets to be pricey. Yes, sir.
If I may, I was just gonna kind of make a suggestion, and then the Parks Board can kind of take it for what it will and ignore me, or see if it's something you might be interested in. So this is it's a big topic, what to do with the mill pond, and it's something that there's a lot of interest in from the community. So my vision, I guess, for right now as we start in is to kind of break it down methodically and bring certain topics back to the Parks Board each meeting for a focus on. So I talked to Eric a little bit about this, but for like the December meeting, putting together a presentation for all of you on what is the history of the mill pond to the best of our knowledge. What has it looked like over time? How has it changed over time? What did people used to enjoy with the mill pond, and what is its current state now? In January, the focus would be on receiving public comment and taking that comments and summarizing it and putting it and preparing for your final report. What has the public had to say to the committee on this topic? Another could be, what opportunities exist on the mill pond that you could take advantage of with whatever option you choose, as far as how far your recommendation on dredging goes. What opportunities does each one create? We had a presentation on the ecology of the mill pond from Patricia earlier, so obviously that will be summarized and incorporated into your final report as well, as to what, and comparing what effect each option might have on the ecology of the lake. Another could be an exploration, and some of these will be simpler, but we have a boat launch there. Our fire department does do water rescues. Do we ask them, when I haven't done this yet, what capability do they have to launch from the launch at the mill pond in order to gain access to Rock Lake with both their ice top rescue boat with the big fan on the back that they use, and then as well as their, other boats that they get to, are they having to take those from the station to another boat launch? Is that public safety consideration for why the board might recommend installing a box culvert that has a higher clearance through it as well? So do we have a presentation and look at the economic aspects that are pointed out in that report? I've kind of asked Eric, and it could, and I'm not saying we should, if there was enough dredging, could the city install more boat slips that they could rent out to residents? There's a huge demand for access to the publicly owned boat slips. Is there that opportunity? I don't know the answer to that right now. And then can we quantify what more access to the mill pond and to the downtown from a water perspective? Can we update those and quantify what that looks like? So, like I said, for December, I kind of asked Eric to start putting together what is the history of the mill pond, to give the board a base of knowledge as to what that has looked like over time. And then if there's topics that the board is interested in, that staff can research for you and bring back information. But kind of each meeting have a specific topic that the board can focus on and methodically work through all the considerations you're going to bring in before you make your final recommendation. And then your report can kind of incorporate all the different factors and topics that you considered that led you to make the recommendation that you did. I just know that topics like these, they're big and they can get unwieldy. And so I found that breaking it down can be beneficial to kind of work towards the finish line.
I think that's a fabulous idea. Thank you. Yes.
I was hoping while we had Mr. Daly at the podium, it's a technical question for making the public notice. Does Misty need proposed language from us to put in her public notice
For a public hearing?
Yeah.
You can provide language. We likely could come up with something ourselves. We're seeking out public input, so it's not a statutory or ordinance requirement of how many times it appears in the newspaper and what that looks like. So it can be a box item in the newspaper that we can do. We can do, Facebook, website promotions, things like that. But if we know the date, time, and the topic, we can probably craft something.
Okay.
I just add to that, it would be nice to have as much advance warning as possible. We get our agenda the week before, but that's really not enough, I think. If we're going to have a big public meeting, we should give at least a couple of weeks' notice so people can...
Yeah, if you want to have the public hearing at your January meeting, we can start preparing for publication and advertisement of that.
As far in advance as possible would be best, I think.
Well, and that might be one of the things we work on, kind of the plan to go to Drake's comment, to say, here's what this is, then we'll do this. And if we have these as our monthly agenda items and they could be published, we could even publish them 6 months or more in advance to say, here's what it is and what it's going to be about. And then people could come and they could be prepared for that. But I think that's a fabulous idea to narrow it down. Because where you've been, it's also always helps you go forward. And all this predates us. Maybe not Mike, but anyway.
I'm younger than I look, I hope.
That wasn't nice of me, sorry. In that, going back to I do not know the history of the mill pond, and like the people have commented before how they used to water ski on it and all that. I know that I did read something about it. There was a development plan. They actually had lake access and all that back in the 30s and 40s. How that went by the wayside, again, is that something that city can do?
We'll look up what we have. We found some older pictures that kind of show, types of things that the mill pond used to have as far as boathouses that were on it and things like that. And if there were other city-led planning efforts or anything like that, we can, pull from that as well.
The other question I have for you, Drake, and for Eric also is, right now, we're looking at numbers. These are, to me, raw numbers by Strand. Do we have any idea of how much grant money would be potentially to offset the cost of, say, raising the ferry bridge?
Not right now. There's probably a few different avenues we can reach out. We can do as well as an explore. So there's going to be traditional grants. Now, if we can, you can kind of tie it to, I guess, placemaking, economic development.
Water safety. I think that's a
public safety, things like that. Then there's always the chance. I've had success and not had success of. It's now called congressionally directed spending, but earmarks on budgets, reaching out to our congressional representatives and our senators. And, I think there's a story to tell with that may behoove itself to, catch someone's eye. So we'll take a look at what the traditional grants out there are like and maybe what, other avenues exist as well. I don't know what those might be right now, but there could be, can we make the public safety argument and tap into funds that might exist there? Can we tap into an economic development argument? Are there, can we tap into park improvement, pots of funding? Those are all things we'll have to explore, is what story can we tell and what criteria can we check off that we're going to be most competitive for in order to do something like that.
anywhere.
Just one last thing, if you're talking about the history, I don't know if you saw on Facebook and then also in the newspaper, Alan and Carol, who had that A-frame, I think her grandfather owned all that. So there's a lot of history in there, and if you want to contact her for more, it may be too remote. I know how to get a hold of her.
So I can speak to that too. I've reached out to previous coworkers that I had at the DNR as far as state archaeologist and the Aslan Historical Society. Robin Huntz being the president of that or chairperson of that has been a phenomenal resource. Also going through archives at the Eldon Fargo Public Library. There's substantial amounts of information on the mill pond itself. What I'm looking for is comparison photos would be the biggest help, at least for me and hopefully to you guys as well. Just seeing what it was previously versus what it is now. However, that's somewhat difficult because you're looking at different vantage points, at different outlays as far as what properties were there at the time. But what I'm trying to do is compile as much resources as possible to give you a scope from how it has evolved from when it was originally created, the mill pond was created, to what it currently is now, and how those uses have changed throughout the years, and what uses we want to see it have moving forward. I can say this is not the first time there's been a potential city proposed project. We're looking at dredging right now as far as a feasibility study. Just today, doing further research in 1915, there was a potential idea to fill the whole thing in and sell it as property and leave it as a channel. So, I mean, there's been multiple different proposed projects for it, and my plan, at least in December, for a presentation that I will give is basically compiling as much of that resources as possible.
Thank you, Drake. Thank you, Eric. This, right now, what I'm thinking is that could be our presentation to the city council, and the December meeting is like, this is our plan. We'll do first part will be a history, and then kind of like as Drake and Eric have presented, we kind of say, here's our plan. And in the first order of business is to have a public meeting, and then that would be just in January. But I think we could get a little bit of the history after the presentation, and say it's the 5th of December to the city council. We could get the history lesson from Eric at our next Parks Board meeting, and then we could kind of come up with a plan as to what our presentations will be going for the next months, as far as here's what we're going to present, and here's the next, after that we're going to do this and all that. I'm seeing nodding heads. Is that what Drake and Eric have presented and proposed, as we would
Yeah, I think
embrace that?
having kind of a direction for each meeting would probably be better than we're just kind of.
Yeah, right now it's all nebulous. We don't really know where we're going and why we're going.
Yep.
So I think what Drake and Eric are proposing, let's back up, do a little bit where we've been, what other people's thoughts are, and then going forward. And I think that would be an excellent idea.
For the public hearing that we want to have the next couple months, do we need to give a direction about what exactly we are soliciting comments on? Like, would we say we're soliciting comments on the options shown in this 2018 study? Or are we just general public hearing on what the public wants to see for the mill pond?
Drake is coming forward.
So, I guess how I see it is maybe in this process, there's going to be 2 public hearings, right? So the first public hearing is you're soliciting from people, how do you use the mill pond? How would you like to use the mill pond? What are your thoughts on the mill pond? What would you like to see here? And then maybe as you get closer to the end of the process and the board's plan is starting to solidify, you have another public hearing and solicit feedback on, here's the steps we went through, here's the investigation, the education, all of the things that we looked at, incorporating all of the needs, the ecology of the mill pond, what's best for the mill pond from that perspective, the economic impact, the public safety impact, the owners of the mill pond and the importance of the mill pond to their properties, how that flows into it, and how all the different options that exist, how they relate back to all of those things, and the board will have to decide, we'll have to balance what all of those considerations are and ultimately what recommendation they make. So as that solidifies, maybe there's another public hearing that shows them what process you all went through and garner feedback on it. And then, you can, when you make your final presentation to the city council, you can kind of show what the initial feedback was and then maybe what the reaction to the plan was. Maybe that changes what your recommendation was. Maybe it doesn't. But you'll have kind of that complete loop, I guess, of beginning to end of where you started with what their opinions were and what their opinion of the recommendation ultimately was. Just a thought.
An excellent thought. Thank you. Great. To your comment, I think what we want to consider is, for like the first public comment, I think it would be helpful to the public to hear the history and kind of a high level of this feasibility study. And then they could comment about that at that meeting. And we take it in and we codify it as best we can. But then once we get that, then we can kind of keep on moving forward. I mean, does that kind of get at, do you think that?
Yeah, just my concern is that if we have a public hearing that's tell us how you use the mill pond, I don't really see that many people showing up to a meeting like that, maybe besides the landowners on the mill pond. But if we give a direction, we're soliciting comments on what, the management options listed in this report and try to gather opinions on that. That's a little bit more directed. I could be wrong, though. I just have concerns about just the general, how do you feel about the mill pond? How would you like to see it operate or be maintained, that we might not really gather that many comments. So I think if we do a more general one first, we should at least give some direction is what we're soliciting comments for.
I see pondering going on.
That's kind of what you said, was you give them the history and then a high-level review of the Strand study.
Okay.
And then have them comment on that. I think you're right. How you use the mill pond, no one cares. But how would you like to use a mill pond? And if we then get it out to the Lake Mills fishing community, the RLIA, you may get more. I mean, you're going to get the riparian owners. They'll be there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, and let's just back up as far as the plan. Do we want to, right now I think we have to have this public comment hearing sometime in January. Maybe that's not true. Maybe we get a little more detail, and then in February or March, when we have more, we can give specific options to the public saying, come comment on this, or this. I mean, is that, I'm still very nebulous as to the concreteness of it all. What are we asking, and why?
I think the first public hearing needs to be broad to encompass what the council has asked us to consider. Okay, so it could be something along the lines of the Parks Board is holding a public hearing pursuant to City Council Resolution 23-41, so it can be referenced and people can know, to consider from the people recommendations on short-term and long-term plans, associated costs, recreational uses of mill pond, also historical and current uses, right? So we get a broader scope because we're supposed to, as a board, consider input from the city of Lake Mills community on those broad issues in section 2 of the resolution. We take in so we have December meeting is the history of the mill pond, January meeting is the public hearing pursuant to the resolution to consider all public input on the scope of the Parks Board study. And then, we can narrow down then the February meeting. Maybe it's something at February we want to talk about from the public comment. Something comes out that we didn't know about, so we need to discuss that at the next meeting. March, we have another more narrowed down meeting. I'm thinking between March and April, we start to have a written draft of a report. First written draft, we should probably take in just as the board to refine that. The second meeting after we have a draft should probably be, again, public comment on our draft recommendations. Again, we're just constantly refining the thing down into specific recommendations for the council to look at. So maybe we make a recommendation, I'm just talking off the cuff, right? We're gonna recommend a 50-foot dredging channel. Somebody sees that at the next public comment, and we get a comment that we didn't consider at first when we first were considering that recommendation. So then we need to refine it a little bit further for our next meeting for a more narrowed recommendation scope. So that's where I see it continuing as we get into March and April and May. Hopefully a draft could go to council by May or June. That will be a year from when the council first put this issue to us. So that's kind of what I'm seeing is the progression of steps.
I would like to have a fair amount of information before I'd even do the initial one, though. For instance, what is the effect on the water quality of those different dredging proposals, the 50 feet and how deep? I don't know that we get that quickly. Do you know what I mean? And we probably I'd like some information from the DNR, some input as to, you guys are really going to be pushing, here's some issues you have to look at. Because I just think that maybe that's a little optimistic to think that by March, at least from what I can figure out, that I'm going to be able to say comfortably, yeah, I think this will work. Also, how long will it last? The dredging. If we do the dredging, how long will that channel last? I would think we'd need several months of meetings to get the input before I would want to sign off on even an initial plan. But maybe I'm being too specific.
Well, it's just getting something in writing to work from is really what I'm getting at.
That's great.
So then, thank you for that clarification. It sounds like the first meeting, we could point to this as the direction, as what is your public comments on the short-term and long-term maintenance needs of the mill pond, and that being the target. That I don't think we need to have a plan. That can just be, how does the public feel about these specific maintenance needs? And then we can continue, like you said, getting more information before we're having the second meeting or hearing giving our options.
I think Drake, from what I understood, Drake to outline was more that you get the first one to get all the input, and then we sift through all the experts' information and additional offline comments, and then by the second public meeting, not that we only have to have two.
Right.
But if we did have just the two, the second one would be, here's what we think, what do you guys say? Because if we have too many public meetings, you start, cook some broth.
Right.
Yeah, I think that the way McCray and Catherine laid out would be a wise course of action. What I'm trying to do now is say, in December, we will have information on the history from Eric. We will have information on the wants, needs of the fire boat access, maybe. Could they give us a needs analysis or something like that for access to Rock Lake? Just for information, and then that kind of a thing. Because I think the more we can say, here's the information we have as far as use and accessibility and why we want to do this, that would be part of the December meeting to us. And then on the January meeting, we could have the public comment with, again, the history, the information on safety and use, and then with public comment after that. Then the next meeting would be that research plus whatever reactions we have to research that the public gave us. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds way more directed than how we've kind of been operating.
Right, and I think that if we keep on going to this is what our charge is and this is why we're doing it, I think we just keep on bringing it back to say, here's the history, here's the different points to consider, benefits and costs. And as Mike is saying, we're talking about both economic but also ecological and all those things going forward. I think that we also as a board want to give the city council an idea. We're not looking at a recommendation per se in the short term. We're probably looking at not before, probably what, you guess in June?
I was just throwing a timeline out there. I mean,
Okay.
we're not beholden to anything, but
Okay.
June will be a year from when the council first gave us this task.
Right.
I think, honestly, they should be given a pretty substantial update by that point if we don't have a significant draft resolution.
Which means 6 months.
Right, yeah.
I feel like we should be narrowing down our options.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So just to sort of recap, what I'm hearing is in December, at our December meeting, we are going to have information on the history from Eric, and we will have information on benefits to the city, safety-wise and maintenance-wise, whatever, to be able to, you'll tell us. Then we will then publish, basically after that meeting, what we found in the history, letting the public know that we will have this presentation and the history and impacts at January, and public comment is welcome.
So you're saying you would want to have the history of the mill pond on the agenda also in January? A second
December.
time?
Yes, because we'll get the history first from Eric.
So at this point now, the meetings are recorded. I don't know if there's a plan yet to make the recordings available online, but I would think that people could go back and watch this or the meeting in December
That's a good point.
as background before they come into a public hearing in January. That was kind of the reason why we're ramping all this stuff up.
Yep. I plan to have these posted along with our agendas online so people can pull up our past agendas. It'll be the same thing as city council meetings. You can pull up a previously recorded video along with the agenda.
So then from that perspective, Eric, I don't necessarily see a reason to put history back on the agenda for a second time in January to give it again.
No, that's a great catch. That's a
Okay.
great catch. Thank you.
Yeah, I think in the public hearing notice, we should include links or whatever to this city council resolution, this Strand 2018 report,
I agree.
and obviously previous agendas, just so everyone has all the information out there if they're so interested to come to a public hearing.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And if they make a comment, we can refer back to the link or that research.
Yeah.
No, that's an excellent catch, thank you. So I'm still old school. So thank you. Any other comments to that? So do we have have a formulated plan here that we are going to, in December, we will hear the history, and you said there are going to be pictures, maybe?
There's going to be, I have all sorts of pictures as much as possible that I'm still compiling, but what I'm doing right now is kind of creating like a timeline of progression of how the mill pond has progressed from when it was formed till now as much as possible. Obviously, there's going to be gaps in what's recorded as far as down in history, but it'll be as extensive as I can get with the sources that I have.
Wonderful. And then, so that will be the December meeting. And then we will, like I said, we'll formulate our ideas for public comment on January. We'll let them know that if they want to see more about the history, look at the meeting for information from the 18th of December. Yes, Brenda?
Given since the mill pond and Rock Lake are so, the public itself is so tied to it and people are really interested in it, it might be beneficial to, advertise that you're going to give the history during this parks meeting in December so you get people really thinking about it and how it affects them and why they want to use it different ways. Because it's not only just the homeowners along the mill pond, it's the city at large and so many people coming in and enjoying, that natural resource. So I think you need to broaden the scope just a bit to invite more people. So you may have more of the public there in December just learning, and then you have them back again for their public comment in January because they've had time to, think about things, how it affects them. Because if you want to do this, it's broad. It's not just, we're going to get little boats to go into the downtown to have dinner. It's how it affects the community as a whole. So that's just something to think about.
Mm-hmm. If I may, administratively, what we can do is we have access to our city Facebook page as well. It's one of our social media outlets. Our agendas are posted on our city website. But if it's decided that we are for sure doing, as a board, the history of the mill pond in December and then a public hearing at the next Parks Board meeting in January, we can absolutely notify the public as much as possible, as far in advance as possible, through Facebook, through whatever for the most part. We have our social media outlets, so we can do that administratively.
So you talk about the advertising or the notification for the public. What are we going to tell them? Are you going to have them we're going to give you a history of the mill pond, its formation, What I anticipate is people who are not aware, I want to at least provide them in as concise as possible. If you actually look at people's attention spans on social media posts and everything, less is more for the most part, so I try to keep things concise and attention grabbing, because I do want people to attend these meetings. But I want to make sure that people understand the Parks Board has been tasked with this via City Council resolution, and that this is just one of the preliminary steps in formulating a recommendation to City Council. But I would just emphasize that the history is going to be discussed. And it also, as part of the history, Eric, are you able to find, or might you be able to find, some decisions made by the city as to the maintenance of the mill pond? Because somebody had to make a decision not to dredge or keep it maintained on the south and let it go to cattails. I would have to go through multiple city council meetings, see if it ever was decided at city council level. The further you go back in history, though, the less I understand
common
that.
Historical records are actually recorded.
Right.
Finding that now, so the channel may have been dredged multiple times throughout that aspect, but that's before permits existed, before there was the Wisconsin DNR, and before any of that was required. I'm not quite sure. Yeah. What I can do at this point is I can at least reiterate things that have been recorded and have permits applied for and everything. Okay.
So, thank you. So, to move to our next meeting and some decisions. So at the December 5th meeting, to the presentation to the City Council, I will say, here's what our plan is. We're going to give the presentation. for the history, which will be recorded. We will then move on to public comment, looking for reactions to the history that was given and the proposal. And then the next meeting will be continue on with a sort of a plan for each step. And according to it can be oral, or I can do some grasp. But right now, I think if we just had sort of a bullet-pointed plan for them and the 5th of December, we should be fine. But I do think what Bernie and others' comments have made is I think we need to make this broad as to the past scope and impacts, and then start narrowing it down with the safety and the ecology and the economics and all that. I think that would be quite helpful. All right, so do we need, where are we at this point? Do we need to make a proposal? Eric, are you making another comment? Just jetting out of here? Okay.
Really, just D is a discussion recommendation, date and time for public comment on the mill pond.
So, yeah, we didn't really move into that agenda item, but we kind of talked about it. Do we want to, it's all intermingled.
We're there.
Yeah, do we want to move on to 7D then? And just, we're going to say the first public comment, it sounds like based on the conversation, it's going to be that January meeting at 5:30.
I would prefer to, even if it's longer, just have a single meeting rather than a separate public hearing and a Parks Board
And we're talking
meeting.
January, right?
I agree. At the January Parks Board meeting at 5:30, whether it's here or upstairs, that should be a public comment, and then we can move into, whenever that's finished, you then move into a regular agenda, so we could have other Parks Board related items too that's not this, or Mill Pond or anything else.
You have something?
I'm just going back to 7C about discussion
Oh,
on
yeah,
creation
sure.
of mill pond presentation, present state costs and feasibility of pond dredging. Are we also now, is that part of the history? We added history to that.
I think it's sort of the overall, what we're looking at for the council is.
Right, I do think for us, we want to, for us,
So the first thing's going to be the history.
then present state
Yeah.
costs and,
The feasibility we'll be
Yeah.
doing as we go on, right?
okay. Eric, you have a comment? Okay. So, yeah, so C, I think that's where we're going to look at. And then on D, discussion recommendation, date and time for public comment on the mill pond, that will be together in January. But as part of the agenda created, we'll say revisit history or comment and then move forward. Anything else on that? That makes sense? Are we making a formal recommendation, or is that not necessary? That should be just fine,
I
right?
think that's fine. That's the discussion piece, yeah.
All right. And then announcements. I'm moving on to agenda item 8, announcements. And then recommendations for future agendas. So right now we're going to put on the agenda Drake.
Just an announcement. I don't know if anyone saw it, but we did do a Facebook post with some public education for the public today. So Eric mentioned the Commons Park Silver Maple had to come down. We realize that can be a touchy subject when a tree has to come down, but if you take a look, we kind of showed what that tree looked like.
That's the city Facebook
Yep,
page.
it was completely hollowed out and a hazard. And then we also took the opportunity to remind residents that we have a tree inspection service through our arborists. So if you have a tree on your private property, you can call the city and have them come out to do a health evaluation, give you maintenance tips, and possibly diagnose any insects that are affecting the tree or any diseases it may have. And today alone, people must have been watching because we got 4 requests for those inspections. So people do, pay attention to the page, and we do get, we have seen some traction there. So I just shout out to the grounds and facilities for promoting what they're doing, not only to keep people in the park safe, but also the services that exist to residents.
Just one more thing I may add.
I have a question for you also, Eric.
Yeah.
Once you make your presentation.
So this has always been a service that my department has had. The actual reasoning behind it is this is an urban forest. It's not just trees that we maintain and manage, but private trees are a portion of the urban forest within the city itself. And being a government organization, we are here to represent the citizens of Lake Mills. We are not a tree company. I see a lot more validity between having us perform this service because we are not making money providing a recommendation to you. We're doing it for the actual general health of the tree and the urban forest. So that's why I do get a little bit leery regardless of the company that provides a recommendation for tree service or recommendations. This is why I definitely do want to promote this service. It has both the interests of the entire urban forest as well as your property. So that's why I do definitely want to continue to promote it. And what's your question?
So my question is, when people use this service, when they ask you how much is it going to cost?
We do not provide them a cost estimate.
Good thinking.
We are not estimators. We do not put a value to our services. We do not make money on these services. We can provide them some local businesses that the city has conducted business with, but we will not provide you a price recommendation or estimate on it.
So thank you. And then do we have recommended options for the people that?
How so? Recommended options as
Trees
far
that they
as-
can replace it with, or?
Yes. Yep. So certain species, I mean, we do have prohibited species within, obviously, our forestry plan. We can provide you ones that we have had success with, so we can provide firsthand accounts. We can reiterate some information that we have with some of the peers that we work with in other municipal forestry programs. So I want to set people up for success. If there's a tree species that we know does not do very well in these climates or these soil conditions, we will not recommend that tree species. Like I said, I want to have the general health of trees succeed, so I wouldn't want to recommend something that doesn't do well. I'm certainly not going to recommend a Bartlett pear to anybody. So,
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully that makes sense.
We don't endorse companies though, so we let residents know that they exist, but we don't give referrals to private companies.
Well, and I just wonder if that could be part of the notification, is that here's what we do, here's what we don't do, because I'm going to guess they're going to ask, and we say this is not part of the service.
And one of the things that I would like to do, I think it was brought up recently, either at a city council meeting or at the last Parks Board meeting, especially with the identification of oak wilt that we do have in the city, we do not test samples. I just want to be very clear with that.
We do not
test samples for oak wilt.
But you did do some testing.
We collect the samples and submit the samples to the Department of Agriculture. That is a service that is paid for. You have to pay for those samples to be tested. So I do want people to be aware that this is how you would collect your samples and send them to the Department of Agriculture for testing. So that's further information that I'd like to relay to the public.
Wonderful. Thank you. That might be something we want to put into the future agendas, is some of the services that were rendered and how many people took advantage of these things. That might be a nice agenda item. All right, anything else as far as announcements or recommendations for future agendas?
I think we've pretty well covered it.
Yeah, I think we're all right.
Have our work cut out for us.
Definitely.
Yes. So the next Parks Board meeting is on the 20th of December, which is holiday week.
It's the week before
Yeah.
Okay.
Christmas.
Oh, good. Okay. That's good to know. All right. So, yes.
If there is a change of venue or a change of room planned, I will let you know all as soon as possible. Like I said, I am pursuing for it to potentially be in council chambers at this point. As soon as I get that confirmed, I'll let you know as far in advance.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Then at 7:48, the meeting is adjourned.